In the heart of a city pulsing with neon and ambition, 16-year-old Reign Harper sat in her high school history class, her fingers tracing the worn pages of a textbook. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but her mind was far away, lost in a story from 1396, when King Richard II of England, a man of 29, wed 6-year-old Isabella of Valois, daughter of France's King Charles VI. The marriage, forged to halt the 100 Years' War, was no tale of passion but a delicate thread of peace, spun across borders stained with blood. Reign's teacher, Miss Caldwell, paced the room, her voice weaving the past into life. Richard II was a king of contradictions, she said, a poet and a dreamer, yet burdened by a throne that demanded strength. His marriage to Isabella was a diplomatic triumph, celebrated with feasts in Calais, where banners of England and France fluttered side by side. But Isabella was a child, her tiny hands clutching a doll as she stood beside a king who towered over her. Reign leaned forward, her braid slipping over her shoulder. The textbook described how Richard, widowed and childless, treated Isabella with a father's tenderness. He gifted her dolls with miniature silver furnishings, their tiny goblets glinting in the candlelight of Windsor Castle. He ensured her household was filled with French attendants, familiar voices to ease her homesickness. At court, where noble children played, Richard decreed that Isabella, though their age, was queen. When a boy dared mock her tiny crown, Richard knelt before her in the great hall, his velvet cloak pooling like ink. "She is your queen," he said, placing a jeweled scepter in her hand, "and her heart is England's hope." The children bowed, and Isabella's cheeks flushed with pride. Miss Caldwell's voice softened. Richard never consummated the marriage. Canon law forbade it until Isabella was 12, but he went further, guarding her childhood like a sacred vow. Chronicles say she grew fond of him, her laughter echoing through the palace as he spun tales of knights and dragons. But their story was brief. In 1399, Richard was deposed by Henry Bolingbroke, who became Henry IV. Richard died in 1400, likely starved in Pontefract Castle, leaving 10-year-old Isabella a widow. Reign's heart ached. She read how Isabella, sent back to France in 1401, mourned Richard, her protector. At 16, she married her cousin, Charles of Orleans, a poet prince who shared her grief. But joy was fleeting. Isabella died in childbirth at 19 in 1409, her life a flicker against history's vast tapestry. Reign closed the book, her fingers trembling. Isabella's courage, her quiet strength in a world that saw her as a pawn, mirrored Reign's own defiance. For Reign, too, had chosen a love that set tongues wagging. A love with a man named Stark, old enough to be her grandfather, whose heart had claimed hers against all odds. Reign Harper was no ordinary 16-year-old. Her eyes, the color of storm clouds, held a fire that could silence a room. She lived in a modest apartment in the city's east side, where the hum of traffic never ceased, and her mother, Clara, worked double shifts at a diner to keep the lights on. Reign's brother, Jamal, was a lanky 14-year-old with dreams of basketball stardom, while her younger sister, Lila, at 10, spent hours sketching fantastical creatures. Their home was cramped but warm, filled with the scent of Clara's Sunday pot roast and the laughter of siblings who bickered and loved in equal measure. But Reign's world had shifted 6 months ago when she met Stark Ellison at a charity gala. Stark, a 62-year-old real estate magnate, stood out in the sea of tuxedos, his silver hair catching the chandelier's glow. He was a man of quiet power, his voice low but commanding, his eyes crinkling with a warmth that disarmed. Reign, volunteering as a server, had spilled a glass of champagne on his cuff. Mortified, she stammered an apology, but Stark only laughed, brushing it off. "A little sparkle never hurt anyone," he said, and their conversation flowed, about art, dreams, the city's pulse. By evening's end, he slipped her his card, his fingers brushing hers. "Call me, Reign. I'd like to hear more of your fire." She did call, and their meetings grew frequent, coffee at a tucked-away café, walks along the river where skyscrapers glittered like stars. Stark listened as Reign spoke of her fears, the girls at school who vanished into the city's underbelly, lured by promises of quick cash, the pressure to trade her body for survival, a shadow that haunted her friends. "I've seen what happens," she told him one evening, her voice fierce. "Prostitution, drugs, men who prey on girls like me. I want more. I want a life where I'm safe, where I'm loved for me." Stark, already married to 3 wives, Mira, Lena, and Tessa, lived in a world Reign could scarcely imagine. His mansion, perched on a hill overlooking the city, was a labyrinth of marble and glass, each wife with her own wing adorned to her tastes. Mira, 45, was a former model, her beauty sharp as a blade, her tongue sharper still. Lena, 38, was a botanist, her wing a jungle of roses and ferns, her quiet demeanor hiding a heart bruised by childlessness. Tessa, 32, was a poet, her rooms draped in velvet, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by years as Stark's favorite. Stark loved them all, or so he tried, balancing their desires like a juggler with too many flames. Yet it was Reign who captured his heart anew. He saw in her a defiance that echoed his own youth, when he'd clawed his way from a tenement to a throne of wealth. Their age gap, 46 years, drew stares, but Reign cared little. "It's love," she told her best friend, Aisha, as they sat on her bedroom floor, magazines strewn about. "He sees me, not just a girl, but me." Aisha frowned. "He's older than my grandpa, Reign. People will talk." "Let them," Reign shot back, her jaw set. "I'm not some fool chasing his wallet. He's the man after my heart." The city's whispers grew louder when Reign and Stark went public. At school, classmates sneered, passing notes that called her gold digger or worse. The tabloids pounced, their headlines venomous, "Teen seductress snags tycoon." Social media buzzed with memes, photoshopping Reign's face onto a sugar baby's body. But the deepest cut came from Clara. Clara Harper was a woman forged by hardship, her hands rough from years of scrubbing plates, her eyes weary but fierce. When Reign brought Stark to their apartment, Clara's face hardened. Stark, dressed in a tailored suit, offered a bottle of vintage wine, but Clara ignored it. "You're old enough to be her grandfather," she said, her voice ice. "What do you want with my girl?" "I love her," Stark said simply, his gaze steady. "She's brilliant, brave, and I want to give her the world." Clara scoffed. "You've bewitched her, haven't you? Some rich man's trick to steal her youth." Reign's temper flared. "Mama, stop. I chose him. He's not forcing me, he's saving me. You know what's out there for girls like me. The streets, the clubs, the men who don't care. Stark does." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You're throwing your life away, Reign. You're 16. "And I know what I want," Reign said, her voice trembling. "If you don't accept us, I'll run away. I'll marry him in secret, and you'll never see me again." The room fell silent, Jamal and Lila watching wide-eyed from the couch. Clara's shoulders slumped, defeat settling like dust. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "If this is what you want, fine." Stark, true to his nature, sought to mend the rift. He sent Clara a diamond necklace that caught the light like a prism, a sports car for Jamal that gleamed red in the driveway, and a full scholarship for Lila to an art academy. Clara wore the necklace, though her smile was tight. Jamal cruised the block, grinning, and Lila's sketches grew bolder, but the gifts couldn't erase Clara's doubt. She watched Reign with Stark, searching for cracks in her daughter's resolve, fearing she'd been swayed by wealth's glitter. Reign's wedding to Stark was a quiet affair, held in a rose-draped chapel with only family and Stark's wives present. Reign wore a simple white dress, her locket with Stark's picture tucked beneath the lace. Stark, in a charcoal suit, looked at her as if she were the only soul in the world. Mira, Lena, and Tessa sat in the front pew, their faces masks of civility. Myra's red lips curved in a smirk, Lena's hands twisted in her lap, and Tessa's eyes stared blankly at the altar. Reign felt their gazes like needles, but she held Stark's hand, her chin high. Life in the mansion was a dance of splendor and strife. Stark, determined to keep his wives cherished, poured his heart into their joys. For Mira, he flew her to Paris for couture fittings, her laughter ringing in the ateliers as she modeled. For Lena, he built a greenhouse where her roses bloomed year-round, their petals soft as her sighs. For Tessa, he hosted poetry readings, her verses filling the library as guests applauded. And for Reign, he chartered a private jet, whisking her to Milan for shopping sprees. They strolled through boutiques, Reign twirling in dresses that shimmered like moonlight, her joy infectious. Stark watched her, his smile soft, and Reign felt like Isabella, honored as a queen in a court that didn't understand her. But polygamy's thorns pierced deep. Mira, whose beauty had once commanded magazines, envied Reign's youth, her sharp tongue lashing out. "She's a child," Mira hissed to Lena one evening, as they sipped wine in the parlor. "What does she know of love? She's here for his money." Lena, whose childless years weighed heavy, felt invisible beside Reign's vibrance. She tended her roses in silence, her fingers pricking on thorns, her heart aching for a child she'd never born. Tessa, whose poetry had once lit Stark's eyes, grew bitter, her verses turning dark. She avoided Reign, her silence louder than words. The wives competed for Stark's time, their rivalry sparking chaos. Mira demanded a new diamond tiara, claiming her status as first wife. Lena begged for a trip to Kew Gardens, hoping to reclaim Stark's attention. Tessa left notes on his desk, her handwriting jagged, pleading for a night alone. Reign, caught in the crossfire, felt their resentment like a storm. When she joined Stark for dinner, Mira's eyes narrowed if she sat too close. Lena's fork scraped her plate when Reign laughed. Tessa left the table early, her chair scraping the marble floor. Reign clung to Stark's love, but the mansion felt like a gilded cage, its walls echoing with unspoken hate. The city's scorn grew louder after the wedding. At school, Reign's locker was defaced with slurs, and classmates whispered as she passed. The tabloids churned out lies, claiming she'd seduced Stark for his fortune. One headline screamed, "Teen Bride Scandal Rock City," with a grainy photo of Reign stepping off Stark's jet. Social media erupted, hashtags like #GoldDiggerReign trending. Reign's phone buzzed with cruel messages, strangers calling her a whore, a fool, a child who'd sold her soul. Reign refused to break. At a school assembly, organized to discuss women's rights, she took the stage, her voice steady despite the hecklers. "You judge me," she said, her eyes sweeping the auditorium. "You call me names, say I'm chasing money. But I married Stark to escape the traps that catch girls like me. I've seen friends fall to prostitution, lured by men who promise cash but deliver pain. I've seen girls my age trade their bodies to eat, their dreams crushed by poverty. The streets are a jungle, and young girls are prey. I chose Stark because he loves me for my heart, not my youth. He's the man who sees my soul, and I married early to build a life free of those shadows. Judge me if you want, but I'm free." The room fell silent, then erupted in applause from some, murmurs from others. Aisha hugged her backstage, whispering, "You're a badass." Even Ms. Caldwell nodded, her eyes proud. Reign's words spread online, a video of her speech going viral, but the press twisted it, claiming she'd glorified child marriage. The backlash intensified, and Reign's resolve wavered. When Stark announced her as his fourth wife at a charity ball, the press pounced anew. Paparazzi swarmed, their flashes blinding as they shouted, "Reign, why'd you steal an old man's heart?" Headlines screamed, "Child bride shames city," and editorials accused her of betraying feminism. The cruelty broke something in Reign. Late one night, she packed a bag, her locket clutched tight, and fled to a seaside cottage Stark owned, its windows facing waves that roared her pain. She left a note for Stark: "I love you, but I can't breathe in their hate." Stark was devastated. He scoured the city, his jet circling the coast, his calls unanswered. Reign, alone in the cottage, walked the beach, her bare feet sinking in sand, her heart torn between love and shame. She missed Stark's laugh, his steady hand, but the world's judgment clung like damp salt. Months passed, and Reign discovered she was pregnant. Fear and joy collided. She was 16, a mother-to-be, her future uncertain. She named the child Sultan, a name meaning strength, hoping he'd inherit her fire. When news of Sultan's birth reached the city, Stark found her. He arrived at the cottage, his suit rumpled, his eyes red. He fell to his knees, tears streaming. "Reign, my love, I've lost you once. Don't make me lose you again." Reign, holding tiny Sultan, saw the man who'd given her wings. She forgave him, her heart softening. In the city square, under a sky bruised with dusk, Stark took a microphone before a crowd of reporters and onlookers. "Reign is my heart," he declared, his voice breaking. "I'll cherish her until my last breath. Our son, Sultan, is our legacy, a testament to a love that defied the world. Judge us if you must, but know this, she is my everything." The crowd, moved by his raw devotion, cheered, some wiping tears. Reign, standing beside him, felt the weight of their love lift her. She returned to the mansion, her head high, Sultan cradled in her arms. 2 years later, tragedy struck like lightning. Reign, weakened by a sudden fever, collapsed in the mansion's garden, her locket slipping from her fingers. Stark held her, begging her to stay, but her breath faded, her eyes closing forever. She was 18, her life a brief, blazing star. Stark, shattered, refused food, his grief a tide that drowned him. Days later, he died, his heart giving out as he clutched Reign's locket, their love sealed in death. Sultan, their 2-year-old son, was left in a mansion of 3 wives, each consumed by their own pain and hatred for Reign. Stark's will, read in the Great Hall, stunned them. All his wealth, estates, investments, the empire he'd built, was left to Sultan, with Reign named as his mother, her memory enshrined in every deed. The wives, expecting a share, were furious, their resentment for Reign now a poison aimed at her son. Mira, whose beauty had faded under envy's weight, despised Sultan most. "He's her spawn," she spat, her voice echoing in the parlor. "A brat born of a gold digger. I'll not raise him." She schemed to erase him, whispering to lawyers to contest the will, claiming Sultan was too young, his claim invalid. She bribed tabloids to revive Reign's scandal, painting Sultan as a cursed heir unfit for Stark's legacy. Lena, whose roses now wilted, saw Sultan as a reminder of her own barrenness. "I wanted a child," she murmured, her hands trembling, but not hers. She refused to touch him, her grief a wall that kept Sultan at bay. She spent hours in her greenhouse, ignoring his cries, her heart too heavy to care. Tessa, whose poetry had turned to ash, hated Reign for stealing Stark's light. "She took him from me," she whispered, her eyes hollow. "Her son will not have my love." She locked her door, leaving Sultan to the maids, her verses now elegies for a life she'd lost. The mansion became a battlefield. Maids, loyal to Stark, fed and clothed Sultan, but none could shield him from the wives' disdain. Mira's allies in the press churned out stories, questioning Sultan's legitimacy. Lena's silence left him invisible, his toys untouched in her wing. Tessa's absence was a ghost, her poetry readings cancelled, the library dark. Sultan, too young to understand, toddled through marble halls, his laughter rare, his mother's locket his only comfort, tied around his neck by a maid. The city watched, divided. Some, moved by Reign and Stark's love, rallied for Sultan, starting funds for his future, their hashtags #SultanStrong trending. Others, swayed by Mira's lies, called him a relic of scandal, urging the courts to strip his inheritance. Clara, now raising Jamal and Lila alone, wept for Reign but refused to take Sultan, her grief too raw to mother her daughter's son. What would become of Sultan, a 2-year-old in a home where polygamy's jealousies burned,